Welcome to the latest episode of Let's Make a Monster, a mini-series highlighting the myths, legends, and distortions of truth surrounding Karen Howell and the Lillelid Murders. The most common question we get from people regarding this case is, why didn't Karen try to stop the murders? Our answer is, she did. She pleaded with everyone that they should just go and leave the family alone. The response is usually a very angry, well, that's not enough. And then they go on to explain in detail how they, of course, would have been the hero and tried to save the day during a sudden and outrageously violent triple murder. Not to sound overly smug or sarcastic, but let's be honest here. These online heroes do their moral grandstanding from behind the safety of a computer screen and with the clarity of hindsight. Needless to say, we don't have as much faith in their starry-eyed teenage heroics as they seem to. It's basically, well, Monday morning quarterbacking, and it's to be expected in this day and age. But the first responder on the scene of the Lillelid murders, Officer Frank Waddell, weighed in on this. Frank is held in the highest esteem in Greene County, and his word on anything is not scoffed at or taken lightly. In an interview for the Devil Came Knocking podcast, Officer Waddell was asked if Karen could have stopped the carnage. This was his response. No. Karen didn't have a choice. If she tried to stop it, she would have been killed too. Just another body in the ditch. The other first responder, Officer Jeff Morgan, concurred with Frank. Both officers would later also agree that the bodies of the victims were not laid out in the shape of a cross, as District Attorney Berkeley Bell has stated numerous times on record. But that's a story for a future episode. It's too bad Karen's case never went to trial. It would have been justice to hear both officers refute the DA's false narratives in front of a packed courtroom. Karen has thousands of supporters, some of whom are former soldiers and law enforcement officers. They are experts on this subject and have much to say on it. This quote is from a supporter who wrote in named Mike. I'm an ex-Army Ranger, and I have seen a lot, but all soldiers, man or woman, don't react the same. I believe she should not be in prison at all. So many prayers for her. This is from supporter John, who was a little more blunt. I'm a retired Army Staff Sergeant and a former Texas police officer. I can't tell you how many soldiers I served with who were scared stiff at the thought of possibly dying and froze up. They can't even shoot. So that's bull about being the hero. That's keyboard commando crap. Strong stuff from John. If nothing else, these quotes highlight that even law officers and trained soldiers can become frightened and disoriented, rendering them incapable of responding in the manner they rehearsed in their heads, or even in the way they were trained for years to respond. There have been books written covering the subject of freezing up and shutting down during times of violence, like Lieutenant Dave Grossman's On Killing, which we highly recommend. Here are a few excerpts. Then came the day of combat, the day for which he had drilled and marched for so long, and with that day came the destruction of all of his preconceptions and delusions about what would happen. In the midst of the confusing, the firing, the screams, the wounded, the soldiers revert doing to what comes naturally. Some shout orders, some run, a few wander off in the smoke, or find a convenient low spot to sink into, and a very few, actually shoot back. That's powerful insight, and very telling. Even in recent years, we've seen cases where armed and trained professionals freeze up in fear during a murder, like in 2018 when a Florida deputy failed to confront a school shooter during a 6-minute attack inside a classroom, resulting in several people being murdered. The brilliant Dr. Viktor Frankl had this to say, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. If Dr. Frankl were still with us, we think he would have a lot to teach us about Karen's reaction to what she saw on that awful day. Same for Crystal Sturgill and Dean Mullins. But even after hearing all of this, many of those Monday morning QBs will still insist that they would have been the hero that day, that they would have known exactly what to do and would have done so without failure had they only been there. To those people, we suggest doing a thorough study on this subject, about how people react when witnesses to violent death of this nature. Talk to ex-soldiers or lawmen who know what it's like when guns start firing and bodies start dropping amid screams and blood and chaos. They might be surprised to learn that chances are they wouldn't be the situational supermen that they're envisioning in their heads, never mind when they were mere teenagers and not fully developed mentally and emotionally. Toss in the fact that several of these defendants had troubled backgrounds and a long documented history of poor coping skills, and it becomes even more clear why they weren't able to do more to stop what happened. Thank you for tuning in.